There is a moment that thousands of women know intimately, even if they've never spoken about it out loud. It's 3 a.m. The room is dark, the house is completely quiet, and yet you are wide awake. Your heart is beating a little too fast. Your mind is already running through a list of things you didn't finish yesterday, things you need to do tomorrow, conversations that didn't go the way you hoped, and feelings you can't quite name. You haven't done anything wrong. You haven't had a nightmare. You haven't heard a loud noise. You simply woke up, and now you're lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering what is happening to you. This has been going on for months, maybe longer, and during the day, it isn't much better. You're exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't seem to fix. Small things set you off, a tone of voice, a misplaced item, a minor change in plans, and you feel a surge of irritation so intense it surprises even you. You snap at someone you love and immediately feel ashamed. You forget what you walked into a room to do. You sit down to focus on something important and 20 minutes later realize your mind drifted somewhere else entirely without your permission. You feel foggy, heavy, emotionally wrung out. And beneath all of that, there is a quiet, persistent question that you keep pushing aside because it frightens you a little. What is happening to me? You tell yourself it's the menopause. Of course it is. You know the word. You've read about it. Maybe you've even talked to a doctor about it. You've been told about the hormonal shifts, the estrogen decline, the changes your body is going through. You've nodded along and accepted it as the explanation for everything. And yet, the explanation doesn't make it hurt any less. It doesn't make the 3 a.m. awakening stop. It doesn't make the irritation easier to manage. It doesn't bring back the version of yourself who felt steady, capable, and clear. So you try harder. You go to bed earlier. You cut out caffeine. You try to meditate. You exercise more. You eat better. You journal. You take supplements. You do everything the articles and the wellness podcasts tell you to do. And some of it helps a little, but none of it seems to reach the root of what's going wrong. The exhaustion comes back. The anxiety comes back. The sleepless nights come back. And slowly, quietly, you start to wonder if maybe this is just who you are now. Maybe this is just what getting older feels like for a woman. Maybe this is something you simply have to endure. I want to stop you right there, because what I'm about to share with you is something that many women in their 40s and 50s are only just beginning to understand. And for a lot of them, it changes everything. The menopause is real. The hormonal changes are real. But for many women, the depth of the emotional suffering they experience during this time, the anxiety, the insomnia, the brain fog, the irritability, the sense of losing themselves, goes far beyond what estrogen alone can explain. And the reason might have everything to do with something happening in your body that almost nobody is talking about. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of your menopause. The beginning of your life as an adult woman. Think about the years you have lived, the responsibilities you have carried, the roles you have filled simultaneously, often without complaint and certainly without enough rest. The daughter, the partner, the mother, the colleague, the caretaker, the organizer, the peacekeeper, the one who remembered everyone's appointments, everyone's needs, everyone's feelings, while quietly setting her own aside. Think about the stress you have absorbed over the years. Not dramatic, obvious stress necessarily, not just the crisis moments, but the slow, steady, accumulating weight of being responsible for so much, for so long, with so little space to simply fall apart. That kind of stress leaves marks. Not just emotional ones, biological ones. And when your body finally reaches the transition of menopause, it arrives at that threshold already carrying years, sometimes decades, of hormonal wear. It doesn't enter this new phase from a place of balance and calm. For many women, it enters it from a place of deep physiological exhaustion. And that changes everything about how the experience unfolds. Here's something that doctors and researchers have been paying increasing attention to in recent years. The hormone cortisol, which most people know as the stress hormone, plays an enormous role in how a woman experiences menopause. And the relationship between cortisol and the emotional symptoms of menopause is something that, once you understand it, makes so much of what you've been feeling suddenly make sense. Cortisol is produced by your adrenal glands as part of your body's stress response system. When you perceive a threat, physical or emotional, your body releases cortisol to help you deal with it. Your heart rate increases, your senses sharpen, your body mobilizes energy. You are ready to respond. This is a beautiful, elegant system. In short bursts, it keeps you alive and capable. The problem is that the modern life of an adult woman rarely gives this system a chance to fully switch off. The stress doesn't come in short bursts with long recoveries in between. It comes in a continuous, low-grade, relentless stream. A stream that the body interprets biologically as a permanent state of emergency. When cortisol stays elevated over a long period of time, which is exactly what happens to women living with chronic stress, it begins to disrupt nearly every other hormonal system in the body. It interferes with sleep cycles. It affects how the brain regulates emotion. It taxes the adrenal glands to the point of fatigue. And critically, it interacts directly with the hormonal shifts of menopause in ways that can dramatically amplify emotional symptoms. Researchers have observed that women with higher baseline cortisol levels during perimenopause and menopause tend to report more severe emotional symptoms, deeper anxiety, more intense mood swings, more disrupted sleep, greater cognitive confusion. The hormonal storm of menopause becomes, in essence, a perfect storm when it collides with a nervous system that is already stretched thin by years of chronic stress. Your body is not breaking down. It is not failing you. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do in response to what it perceives as an ongoing emergency. The problem is that the emergency never turns off, and your body has been living in survival mode for so long that it has forgotten what calm feels like. If any of this is resonating with you, if you're the woman who wakes up at 3 a.m. with a racing heart, who feels emotionally depleted even after a full night's sleep, who has been trying everything and still feels like something is missing, there is a guide in the first link in the description that was created specifically for you. It walks through the connection between cortisol, chronic stress, and menopausal symptoms, and it outlines real, evidence-based approaches for women 45 and over who are ready to start addressing the root, not just the symptoms. The link is right there in the description. Take a look when you're ready. Now let's talk about what elevated cortisol actually does to a woman's body and mind during menopause, because this is where things get very specific and very recognizable. The first thing elevated cortisol does is destroy the quality of your sleep. Not just the amount of it, the quality. You might be in bed for 7 or 8 hours, but if your cortisol levels are dysregulated, your body never fully enters the deep, restorative phases of sleep that actually allow you to recover. You float in the lighter stages, easily disturbed, easily pulled back toward wakefulness. This is why so many women during menopause describe sleeping but never feeling rested. This is why the alarm goes off and the exhaustion is still there, sitting on your chest like a weight. And the 3 a.m. awakening, that particular cruel pattern, has a specific biological explanation. Cortisol is supposed to follow a natural rhythm, rising in the early morning hours to prepare your body for the day. But when the system is dysregulated, that cortisol spike can happen too early, at 2, 3, or 4 in the morning, jolting you out of sleep with a rush of alertness and anxiety that has nothing to do with anything external. Your body is simply, mistakenly, sounding an alarm. The second thing elevated cortisol does is hold your nervous system hostage. When cortisol is chronically high, your nervous system stays locked in a state of hypervigilance. Everything feels slightly more urgent, slightly more threatening, slightly more overwhelming than it needs to be. The small frustrations of daily life, the traffic, the miscommunication, the moment when someone doesn't do what you needed them to do, register as crises rather than inconveniences. This is where the disproportionate irritation comes from. This is why you can feel a wave of rage or distress over something that your rational mind knows is minor. It's not you being irrational. It's not you being difficult. It's your nervous system operating at maximum sensitivity, responding to stimuli that it would normally process calmly but currently cannot. And this is profoundly important to understand, because so many women spend years blaming themselves for this. They apologize to their families. They feel guilty. They tell themselves they need to be more patient, more controlled, more measured. and they exhaust themselves trying to manage emotional responses that are being generated not by their character, but by their biology. You are not broken. You are running on a system that is overloaded. The third thing elevated cortisol does is cloud your thinking. The brain fog that so many women describe during menopause, the forgetting, the difficulty concentrating, the sense that their mind isn't working as sharply as it used to, has real neurological roots. Cortisol, at chronically high levels, affects the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain responsible for memory and learning. It affects the prefrontal cortex, which governs focus, decision-making, and emotional regulation. It literally changes the way your brain functions, and it does so in ways that are measurable, documented, and real. This is not you becoming less intelligent. This is not an inevitable cognitive decline. This is a physiological response to an overloaded stress system. And for many women, addressing that underlying dysregulation leads to a meaningful, noticeable return of mental clarity. The fourth thing elevated cortisol does may be the most insidious of all. It steals your sense of self. When you are exhausted, emotionally reactive, unable to think clearly, and waking up anxious in the middle of the night, month after month, you begin to lose your grip on who you are. The woman who felt capable, energetic, joyful, grounded, she starts to feel like a distant memory. You look in the mirror and don't quite recognize the person looking back. Not physically necessarily, but in terms of presence, in terms of inner light. And this loss of self is something that women rarely talk about openly because it feels too vulnerable, too abstract, too hard to explain. But it is devastatingly common. And it is not a character failure or a spiritual crisis. It is the predictable psychological consequence of living in a body that has been under siege, hormonally, neurologically, emotionally, for an extended period of time. Let me ask you something. Think about all the women you know who are in their 40s and 50s. Really think about them. How many of them are describing variations of the same experience? The sleeplessness, the irritability they feel guilty about, the anxiety that seems to come from nowhere, the exhaustion that doesn't lift, the sense of being somehow lost inside their own lives. Have you ever noticed that? How remarkably consistent these stories are? Some researchers and clinicians have noticed it too, and they've started asking why. If this were simply the random chaos of hormonal fluctuation, you would expect a much wider variety of symptom profiles. But what they find, again and again, is this particular cluster: insomnia in the early morning hours, emotional volatility, cognitive fog, deep and disproportionate fatigue, and a persistent undercurrent of anxiety. That pattern, that specific, recognizable constellation of suffering, is increasingly being understood as a signature of cortisol dysregulation interacting with the hormonal changes of menopause. It is a body in a state of prolonged alert, struggling to find its way back to balance. And here is the thing that matters most. It doesn't have to stay that way. For women who are 45 or older and have been living with these symptoms, the sleepless nights, the emotional exhaustion, the fog, the irritability, there is a method explained in the pinned comment below this video. It was developed specifically to help women understand and address the cortisol component of menopausal symptoms. It's practical, it's grounded in real science, and it's given a lot of women their first meaningful sense of relief after months or years of struggle. Check the pinned comment. The information is there for you. Now let's talk about what actually helps, because this is the part of the conversation that often gets skipped, and it's the part that matters most. When we understand that elevated cortisol is a significant driver of the emotional and cognitive symptoms of menopause, the approach to healing shifts. Instead of only addressing the symptoms, taking something for sleep, something for mood, something for focus, we can begin to address the underlying state that is generating those symptoms. And that means working with the nervous system. The human nervous system is extraordinarily adaptive. It can be trained. It can be recalibrated. And while the process takes time and consistency, it is absolutely possible for a woman to shift her cortisol patterns, restore better sleep architecture, reduce emotional reactivity, and recover cognitive clarity, not through willpower or pushing harder, but through approaches that actually communicate safety to a system that has been living in danger. What does that look like in practice? It looks like understanding the difference between rest and recovery. Many women know how to rest, to sit down, to pause, to be still. But true nervous system recovery requires something deeper, the actual biological signal of safety. Learning to create that signal, through specific kinds of breathwork, through somatic awareness, through deliberately slowing the pace of daily transitions, is one of the most powerful things a woman can do for her cortisol regulation. It looks like addressing sleep not just as a behavior to be managed, but as a biological process to be supported. The sleep-cortisol relationship is bidirectional. Cortisol disrupts sleep, and poor sleep elevates cortisol, creating a cycle that only deepens over time. Breaking that cycle requires working on both ends simultaneously, with strategies that are actually matched to the hormonal context of menopause. It looks like understanding the role of blood sugar regulation. This is one of the most overlooked factors in the cortisol conversation, and yet it's one of the most impactful. When blood sugar fluctuates significantly throughout the day, which is extremely common in women going through menopause, the body responds to each drop by releasing cortisol to bring it back up. If you're eating patterns that cause frequent spikes and crashes, your body is triggering cortisol releases multiple times a day, every day, adding to an already overloaded system. It looks like recognizing the role of the inflammatory response. Chronic stress promotes chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation promotes chronic stress. For women in menopause, this cycle is particularly active, and addressing inflammation through anti-inflammatory nutrition, movement, and stress reduction creates measurable shifts in how the body manages cortisol. And perhaps most importantly, it looks like finally giving yourself permission to take this seriously. Not as a luxury, not as something you'll get to when things calm down, but as the central, urgent, fundamentally important work of this season of your life. Because you have spent years, possibly decades, being the person who keeps everything running, who absorbs the stress, who holds it all together, and your body has been keeping score. The bill doesn't arrive in one dramatic moment. It arrives slowly, quietly, in exactly the ways you've been experiencing: the sleeplessness, the irritability, the fog, the exhaustion, the sense of losing yourself. And the path back is not about pushing harder. It is about finally, genuinely, getting underneath the surface. There is something I want you to sit with for a moment. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not failing at menopause. You are a woman whose body is sending a very clear, very urgent signal. And for a long time, that signal has been misread or missed entirely. The emotional intensity you've been living with, the sleep disruption, the cognitive fog, the exhaustion that sits at the very bottom of you. These are not character flaws. They are not signs that something is fundamentally wrong with who you are. They are physiological symptoms of a system that is overloaded and desperately seeking equilibrium. And the most important thing I can tell you is this: the system can find it. Not instantly, not through a single intervention, not through willpower alone, but through a genuine, informed, compassionate engagement with what is actually happening in your body, including, critically, the role that cortisol dysregulation is playing in your experience. Meaningful relief is possible. Real, lasting, biological relief. Women who have begun to work with this understanding describe it in remarkably similar ways. They talk about a gradual return of quiet, an internal quiet that they had stopped believing was still possible. They talk about waking up in the morning and feeling, for the first time in a long time, like themselves. They talk about having conversations with their partners and their children without that constant edge of reactivity. They talk about sitting down to work and finding that their minds can actually follow a thought to its conclusion. Not perfection, not the erasure of every difficulty, but a return to function, a return to self, a return to the woman they know themselves to be. That is what becomes possible when the real root of the problem is finally addressed. Think about the women in your life who are going through this: your sister, your best friend, the colleague you see every day who seems tired in a way she can't explain, the woman at the school gate who used to be warm and funny and now seems frayed around the edges, the mother who apologizes for being irritable and doesn't know why she can't seem to stop. They are living this right now, In silence, mostly. In confusion, often. In shame, sometimes. Because the cultural narrative around menopause has never been particularly kind or particularly accurate. It has been vague at best and dismissive at worst. It has told women to expect difficulty without offering them genuine understanding of what that difficulty actually is, where it comes from, or what they can do about it. And in that vacuum of understanding, too many women have concluded that the problem is them. It isn't them. It has never been them. It is a biological reality that has been chronically under-discussed, under-researched, and under-addressed. And it is finally, slowly, beginning to receive the serious attention it deserves. If you've made it to this point in the video and you recognize yourself in what you've been hearing, if you've been the woman lying awake at 3 a.m., if you've been the woman feeling like she's losing her mind, if you've been the woman who is exhausted beyond words and desperate for something to actually change, please go to the first link in the description right now. There is a complete guide there for women 45 and over who are ready to understand the cortisol connection, address the root of their emotional symptoms, and begin the real process of recovery. Not a quick fix, not a miracle. A real, grounded, informed path forward. It's in the description. Click it. You've earned the right to feel better. I want to close with this. The transition of menopause is, in many ways, one of the most significant passages of a woman's life. It is the body reorganizing itself at a fundamental level. It is the end of one biological chapter and the beginning of another. And for all the difficulty it can bring, there is also something extraordinary happening. A kind of reckoning, a kind of clarifying, a kind of invitation to finally understand your own body in ways you may never have before. The women who come through this passage with the most grace are not the ones who suffered least. They are the ones who were given, or who found for themselves, the understanding they needed, who learned to read the signals their bodies were sending, who stopped blaming themselves for symptoms that were never their fault, who found approaches that actually worked with their biology rather than against it. That understanding is what you deserve. That is what every woman going through this deserves. Not to be told to push through. Not to be told it's normal, and there's nothing to be done. Not to be handed a prescription for a symptom while the root cause continues unaddressed, but to be genuinely seen, to be genuinely informed, to be given the knowledge and the tools to navigate this transition with real support, real clarity, and real hope. The body that wakes you at 3 a.m. is not your enemy. The nervous system that has been running in overdrive for years is not your enemy. The cortisol that has been flooding your system is not your enemy. They are all, in their own way, trying to protect you. They are all doing the only thing they know how to do with the information they've been given. Your work now is to give them different information, to show them that the emergency is over, to create the conditions, biological, emotional, behavioral, for your system to finally, fully exhale. That exhale is possible. You are not too far gone. It is not too late. The path back to yourself is real, it is accessible, and it begins with understanding what has actually been happening inside your body all along. And now, for the first time perhaps, you do. The guide in the first link in the description was created for women exactly like you. Women 45 and over who are tired of surviving menopause and ready to understand it, address it at the root, and begin to truly recover. Everything you need to know about the cortisol connection, the approach, and the path forward is there. Go take a look.